Chapter 2. The Church. Etal Island was anchored by two Christian churches, one Catholic and one Protestant. The church buildings stood within earshot of one another, situated on a compound of crushed coral, shaded by an enormous breadfruit tree. Dogs lazed about, unaffiliated with either, and two rusted propane canisters hung from tree limbs to call parishioners to their respective services, each tank emitting a different tone. On sunny days, heat shimmered from the metal roofs, and when it rained, the downpour could be so deafening that the preachers shouted to be overheard. Regardless of the weather, on Sunday mornings, the air was filled with song, the two congregations competing to out-sing the other. Page 33. The compound also included two thatch-covered open-air gathering places for feasts, choir practices, church school, PTA meetings, and politics. A parish house for the priest stood alongside the lagoon. The Protestant missionaries, usually a married couple, resided some ways distant. The two church buildings were of similar design, but because of my Catholic upbringing, I'll limit myself to describing my own. Our sanctuary was bare of furniture, accommodating perhaps 100 parishioners, all sitting on a cement floor. We were divided by both gender and age, children in front, women and girls to the left, boys and men to the right. Attended by barefoot altar boys, the priest maneuvered about on a slightly elevated platform, which supported the altar, adorned with a wooden crucifix and lesser statuary of Mary and Joseph. Behind the altar was the sacristy, a small changing room where the priest's robes, chalice, and other ceremonial artifacts were kept. Women, holding pandanus woven fans, endeavored to move the torpid air. Dogs, cats, and children wandered in and out. Hymns learned in childhood were sung with enthusiasm. Church history. Protestants were the first to gain a religious foothold in the Mortlocks. Later, a Jesuit Spaniard named Father Espinal instituted a Catholic church on the nearby atoll of Lucanor. My great-grandfather, Lorenzo, visited Lucanor to investigate and liked what he saw. Inviting Father Espinal to come with him to Etal, he was introduced to the village council. The priest accepted the invitation, but was rudely received. Page 35. "We don't need Catholics on Etal," the Protestant council members proclaimed. Father Espinal retreated, but my great-grandfather persisted, returning to Lucanor with his family to be baptized, subsequently donating family land to build a church. Lorenzo was attacked and injured by an angry mob, but he remained steadfast. Lorenzo's eldest daughter, Pilar, my great-aunt, whom we respectfully called Nono, told me many stories of her father. When I heard the gossip that Lorenzo in his old age became deranged, Nono assuaged my anxiety. "It's true," she explained, "that as an old man, Lorenzo camped out in the church, smoking his cigarettes, absconding with the church bell, chasing away trespassers, claiming the church to be his own." Page 36. By the time of my childhood, any disputes between the churches had long since dissipated. The congregations tried to outsing one another, but otherwise it was a peaceful coexistence, with the Catholics having become the majority. Years later, I wrote a master's thesis about my great-grandfather, growing in my respect for him, appreciating his long suffering and love. Father Rively and the Bishop. Father Rively visited monthly from Lucanor, occasionally accompanied by the bishop. Lay-trained local catechista substituted during the weeks of his absence. Father Rively was an American who spoke the Chuukese language fluently. I thought he was the most intelligent man I'd ever met. It's because priests are closer to God, I figured. Rumor had it that before he got his calling, Father Rively played baseball for a New York Yankee farm team. Not surprising, I figured, as close to God as he is. When Father Rively arrived with the bishop, everything came to an abrupt halt. We children were excused from school, bubbling with excitement. "The bishop is coming! The bishop is coming!" Attired in long, flowing white cotton robes, the bishop was carried by young men across the shallows to the shore, so as not to soil his vestments. "Let's go to the church," we'd whisper. "The bishop has candies." The community gathered on the sun-bleached churchyard, the bishop standing on the parish steps, tossing lollipops. Later, when my cousins and I played on our beach, we pretended to be carrying the bishop, blessing the parishioners, genuflecting, and of course, tossing the lollies. Communion and confirmation. My grandmother made sure I was well studied for my first communion, followed by the sacraments of confirmation. I memorized the prayers, including recitations of Our Father and Hail Mary, which Father Rively insisted be recited in front of the congregation on the ceremonial Sundays. After the ceremonies, sitting on the days with the elders, amid speeches and feasting, I began to realize the social significance. Fish, pork, chicken, warm soda, and yes, lollipops served to build community. "Perhaps you would like to become altar boys," Father Rively asked my cousin and me. "Altar boys?" we exclaimed. "Altar boys?" we repeated. We danced on air. We'd be the envy of every kid in the congregation, positioning us closer to God than we'd ever been. What we didn't realize, however, was that Sunday services were complicated. Altar boys were expected to know everything from parading to genuflecting, bell ringing to candle lighting, pouring the wine without drips or dribbles. It was like an hour's worth of synchronized swimming performed under the scrutiny of every mother in the pews. Stolen chicken, page 40. Other than my grandfather, Father Rively was the most significant authority of my childhood. I was perhaps 12 years old when my mates showed up at my grandparents', toting the storekeeper's chicken in a cotton sack. We all knew that stealing was wrong, but stealing chicken was somewhat forgivable among island teens. "What are you up to?" I asked, knowingly. Feeling twinges of guilt, we traipsed to our favorite lagoon-side haunt to kill, pluck, grill, and eat, covering our tracks by burying the bird's head and feathers in the sand. Under a crescent moon, we filled our bellies, giggled, and laughed. The chicken was delicious, a finger-licking, guilty pleasure. Page 41. At school the following day, we heard the gossip that a prized chicken had gone missing from a tree in the shopkeeper's yard. It had likely been stolen, it was suggested. At recess, we huddled in the schoolyard, hushed and guilt-ridden. "They'll never catch us," we whispered. "Will they?" The clues of our undoing were soon discovered, including the charred remains of the cooking fire, chicken bones strewn about in the sand, and, most incriminating of all, the recognizable head and feathers, which had become disinterred, uncovered perhaps by the incoming tide. Bearing the cache of evidence, the angry accusers approached my grandfather, who referred them to me. "If you don't give it up, we will tell the priest," they threatened. "And if you're guilty, God's punishment will be swift and severe. You and your mates will cluck like chickens until the day you die, and all the world will know of your sin." The very thought of Father Rively collaborating with God to curse me was more than I could stand. The shame, the unforgivable shame. I gave a full confession to my grandmother, who spanked me and forbade my friends from setting foot on their property again. My mates and I apologized. The stolen chicken was replaced. The shopkeeper expressed forgiveness. I neither clucked nor crowed, but it was the last time I ever stole a chicken. Movie nights. On Saturday nights, a parishioner draped a cotton sail between coconut trees. An electric generator grumbled to life. The movie projector whirred, and Protestants and Catholics alike settled under a canopy of stars to be transfixed by Hollywood. We knew little or nothing about America other than what Father Rively threaded onto his projector. In school, we memorized the names of American presidents and the various houses of government, but nothing made a stronger impression than how the West was won. Smoking his pipe and pacing about, Father Rively became as excited as anyone. We'd never seen cowboys nor Indians until the last tomahawk. We didn't know tomahawks, spurs, buckboards, buzzards, banditos, biscuits, or beans. We'd never seen horses, rattlesnakes, wagon trains, nor tumbleweeds. Who were these white men wearing cowboy hats and bullet belts, saying such things as "Howdy, ma'am," and "Stick 'em up"? Most memorable for me were the Apaches attacking the wagon trains, the braves whooping and hollering, shooting arrows from their ponies, cowboys crouching behind wagon wheels to fend them off. Suddenly, a voice from the rear shouted, "Fire!" Turning our heads to identify the source, we recognized the kindly man who had set up the screen. "Aka, usan maorwe," he shouted, dashing to a nearby well to obtain a bucket of water. "It's okay," Father Rively guffawed, putting down his pipe. "Your property is fine. The fire's coming from the movie." Sheepishly, the man regained his composure. We kids were relieved too. Flaming arrows were too much. They didn't seem fair. The Protestants also showed movies. They handled their movie nights differently, however. Instead of gunfights and lynch mobs, the Protestants showcased parables and moral tales, such as the one about the bully, who was feared by his schoolmates but was really lonely at heart and needed only to be forgiven. The plot was boring, but the method of delivery made it even worse. Partway through the showing, the pastor would stop the projector to ask questions. "How do you think the bully feels? What would you do if you were being bullied? Why do you think the bully should be forgiven?" We kids were polite enough to play along, mumbling such things as, "The bully is lonely and doesn't know how to make friends. If I were bullied, I'd tell my teacher and turn the other cheek." The general consensus, however, was that the Catholics won the award for the best movie nights. I mean, who wouldn't prefer Father Rively's Noose for a Gunman over a moral tale entitled Forgive and Forget? Page 46, Community Voices. Although Father Rively was not in full-time residence, we maintained many of our church activities even in his absence. Lay church members called Catechista taught Sunday school, and of course we continued with choir practices and prayer. Christmas and Easter were our largest feast days. We weren't into Santa Claus or Christmas trees, nor bunnies and Easter eggs. In their place, we gathered as a community to pray, eat, orate, and sing. Pigs, chickens, and dogs were roasted, fish, taro, and breadfruit too. Our gathering places were decorated with palm fronds and flowers. The community sang and paraded, not to show off or be entertaining, but rather as expressions of love and gratitude. Page 47. Easter and Christmas signaled opportunities for us to travel to Lucanor to celebrate with our larger church. How exciting to be part of a flotilla of sailing canoes in pilgrimage across the lagoon. Welcome to Lucanor, Father Rively, dressed in white cotton robes, greeted us as we waded across the shallows to reunite with old friends. Page 48, Beach Play. My peer group included Nick and Timas, my age. The year younger guys, Fabian, Jerry, Kerman, Curtus, and Petrus. And the year older ones, Alec, Atal, Nor, Sotam, and Thomas. After church services ended, we were left to our imaginations. At the far end of the island on the lagoon side, we role-played imaginary games, such as priest and bishop, sailor boys, and kung fu. Cowboys and Indians was by far our favorite. Nothing surpassed shooting it up in the American West. Riding prancing stallions down the village path, up the church steps, and down the aisle to the altar, our spurs jingling. We tossed handfuls of money into the collection plate, sang cool stuff like, "Howdy, ma'am," to Mother Mary, and "Best we be leavin'" to the good priest.